Okay. Well, I assume they will then.
They left Sunday, they're supposed to be back today, and they went to the church.
They were supposed to be back Sunday. They were already gone. Last Wednesday night, they were already gone.
Went to church, they're in church Sunday.
Nope.
No,
They're back Saturday, Sunday night.
that's what I said. I asked Virgil if we went home, because I don't always see everybody. I said, Richard and Sandy went over, they were here. He said, no.
Yeah, you were here.
You were here.
Body. I don't know about mentally. Huh?
What were we talking, Sandy?
No, dear.
What were we talking?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just trying to confuse me,
He's that weird
because you know you can.
younger brother.
Oh, we had 4 witnesses that they weren't here.
Yeah.
You gotta believe it, Jim.
I don't believe it.
Does anybody want unsweetened tea?
Unsweet.
Yeah, I'll take some.
Josh did. Well, it's sweet. You make it unsweet.
I can have
For
some.
sweet people, right? Unsweet tea. Want this back up and was it here? The cup didn't fit. Is that okay?
Better hurry up. It's 3 minutes after.
Starts at 1 o'clock, guys.
Yeah. I want more studying from the Bible.
Everybody wants tea, she's gonna make tea.
Yeah.
Glad you worked.
She must make tea every week.
That's fine.
Did you want tea, Virgil? Did you want tea? I think I will get that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Give them a boot to get in here.
Mark 8.
Anybody else
Yep.
unsweet?
Unsweet.
Yep.
Mr. Josh. All right.
Peter's Confession of Christ.
Well, really, we're at verse 13.
And what?
That's a good head.
Yeah, I think you read ahead. Verse 13 is where we actually are.
And what, Mark? Or-
Yeah, Mark 8.
Okay, that's all right.
Maybe do it again.
Well, how many pages have you done already on your homework?
None. I've had a crazy time since I've been back, so
No, what's up with that? Mine has been too.
nothing has gotten done. Sorry. It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
How many want sweet tea?
Okay, that'd be me and Jim.
She said sweet.
Unsweet is what we
I
want.
already gave you one unsweet.
Oh, I have it. Sorry. I'm a dork. Ignore me.
Nobody wants any.
Sweet tea? Jim wants sweet. Okay, Jim wants sweet. Sorry.
I'm tired of being sour. I want to be sweet. I'm sweet enough.
Yeah.
No.
I never drank that sweet stuff until started drinking it here. Got used to it. And the sweet tea was always too sweet.
Yep, that's right.
McDonald's has got real good tea. Sweet tea.
It's like drinking syrup to me. I want like 1/16 of the sweetness that they have. Like, I don't mind a little sweet, but everybody makes it way too rich for me.
I need to be sweeter.
Ken likes it, and Blake likes it. I like it. McDonald's. Sweet tea.
Wow.
McDonald's had a tea. Sweet tea.
My parents were anti-sugar, anti-salt growing up, so everything tastes too salty and too sweet to me. I just,
Yeah.
I still need salt.
all I do is add pepper to stuff.
I don't have salt because years ago I was hit by a car and I don't know why they put me in a no salt diet. And ever since then I don't care for salt. It's funny how you get
Yeah.
used to something. And I wasn't on it that long, but He put salt on his tomatoes. I said, "Yeah, you don't get the taste
Oh,
of tomatoes on
Way to go.
it."
There you go, Jim.
Some people put sugar on their tomatoes, some people put salt on their
Yeah,
tomatoes.
I don't do nothing. I eat them white.
I just want the tomato with something. I just don't want it by itself. I like tomatoes, but I want them with something.
See, I want what comes with the tomato. You can have the tomato.
Okay. Like I like tomatoes on everything, in everything. I just don't want them by themselves.
Not quite.
Especially
Hot sauce and eggs.
I like hot sauce and
I
eggs.
know a lot of people do.
Yeah. Yep.
They're popular.
Yep.
I can't see it
I
though.
like that.
I like eggs with tomatoes.
I do too.
I like salsa on my eggs.
Say, when I came back here from Arizona and I ate salsa on my eggs, Tammy said, "You've been in Arizona too long."
It's like onions. I love onions, but I want them with something. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Peppers. I like peppers, but I want them with something. In fact, I want all of it just together.
Who makes the onion? Like it's a big onion here. We've ate that alone, and that.
The bloomin' onion.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone made it here. Some with like roast beef or something like that.
Oh, the cooked onions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can eat those by
Really
themselves. Yeah, I can eat stewed
Someone here made
tomatoes.
it. That's what I had at Daytimers.
Yeah.
I tried it and I couldn't eat it. So
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we're in Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 13. Jim's already on verse 27, so he's ahead of all of us.
Jim's gonna teach.
Yeah. What's that?
Jim teaching.
Yeah, well, if he wants to. I won't stop him. All right. So in Mark chapter 8, we are just past the feeding of the 4,000. And Jesus is doing less and less, you might call them charitable miracles. He's sort of toning that part of his ministry down. That doesn't mean Jesus isn't charitable. In fact, we're about to have a story where he heals a blind man. So he's not going to stop doing charity, but he's putting the emphasis less on the charity and more on eternity. And that is the more important thing. And for every one of us, because we live on this earth and we have flesh, sometimes it's hard to remember what's more important in the moment. And that's one of the lessons Jesus is trying to teach, not just the people, but even his closest friends, the disciples, because even they just don't get it. Just like I think me and all of us can have that same problem. So let's start reading. Let's read verses 13 through 16, anybody who's willing.
Leaving them, he again embarked and went away to the other side. And they had forgotten to take bread and did not have more than one loaf in the boat with them. And he was giving orders to them, saying, "Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." They began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Now, of course, I think every time anybody reads this, you sort of laugh at the disciples because Jesus is obviously not talking about real bread. But at the same time, how often have I been clueless? I don't know if you'd ever put yourself in that category, but I put myself in that category on a regular basis. For example, I couldn't even figure out if Shirley was talking about sweet or unsweet tea a moment ago. I mean, that's how out of it I can sometimes be.
You know, I would think with these guys too, it depends on how hungry they are.
True.
You know, if you're not very hungry, fine, you'll think about something else. If you're hungry, that bread sounds good.
That's all you're thinking about,
Bunch
right?
of guys together, we grumble. I'm hungry. I'm hungrier. I could eat a horse.
In fact, I've learned if people are hungry, you can't do anything else. You got to eat. Like, that's just the priority in the moment. When Kara and I were first married, she would get upset with me because on my way to the refrigerator, if she was on the way to the refrigerator, she'd expect me to stop and give her a hug. But all I'm thinking about
Food.
is food. So I've learned to stop and pay a little attention to I mean, we're talking about 10 seconds, right? Not like she's going to
Yeah.
occupy me for several hours or anything.
I know what she could do. She could have food for you. You could give her a hug and take the food. Win-win.
Keep dreaming, Alex.
I'm long.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's not the way it works. So, you know, we can laugh at the disciples here, but yeah, I think we're all the disciples sometimes. Well, let's talk about what this phrase is that Jesus is talking about here in verse 15. Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. We're going to talk about the leaven here in a second, but let's talk about the Pharisees and Herod. Now, the Pharisees, of course, are the religious leaders. And they're self-appointed, by the way. Here's a bonus question for you. Did anybody in the law of Moses in the Old Testament, did any of them, were they Pharisees?
I'd say no.
No. It's a made-up position. The Jews made it up. Now, I thought about this in regards to modern church. How many presidents of denominations are there?
Oh boy.
A lot, right? How many councils are there? How many cardinals are there? How many popes have there been? There's so much made up religious nonsense. And that's what it is. It's religious nonsense that man has made up. And so Jesus is warning against not just the leaven of these people, but those people themselves, because they have fake religious authority. It's made up. And they gave it to themselves. You know, the Pharisees were an invention of the Jews after they got back from the Babylonian captivity, because they had been in captivity several times for idolatry. So the idea, the good intention, that's always what it is, right? Good intentions of designing the Pharisee order or the Pharisaical order was to prevent idol worship. Well, you know what's funny? They succeeded in that. But does something of good intention always grow into something it shouldn't?
Does it always?
Yeah.
No,
You don't think so?
not all.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about, okay, maybe I should rephrase it. Does something with authority always grow into something it shouldn't? For example, you know, this is a government order, right? This is what they are. They're in charge of the people. Do you think people in power are ever content with the power they have?
Oh, no.
Right. That's where I'm getting at. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I didn't phrase it right. I'm glad you said that. But things with authority where people have power, they're never just content with their little lot. They're always going to try to expand it. And even if you have a benevolent dictator, that's a phrase I've heard recently, you know, a good king. The problem is it could always be followed by what?
A bad king.
A bad king. In fact, it almost always is. Bad people. Especially power that looks like it has the potential to grow. So by the time we went from the Babylonian captivity, where the Pharisees' main job was to keep the idols out, which they succeeded in, to the time Jesus comes, where they basically rule over everything in the Jews and drive everybody nuts with all their additional rules, they have become corrupted beyond repair. And so Jesus is warning about the Pharisees themselves and also Herod. Now, Herod is a really unique character. He is the secular governor. He's the secular king at the time. He's a Jew by background, but not one by ethnicity. You see, Herod was not descended from Jacob. He was descended from Esau. He's an Edomite. And so he's sort of a cousin of the Jews, but he's not a Jew ethnically. But he's been raised a Jew culturally. So he does the festivals and he eats kosher and he, you know, blends in with the culture. But when it comes to religious law, Herod couldn't care less. Herod wasn't concerned with the moral law. He was just worried about the ceremonial law. And that reminds me of so many people in power who call themselves Christians. And I'm not referring to any one person. There's so many of them that call themselves Christians who play the cultural end of it to some degree, but they themselves don't give a darn about the moral aspect of it. Well, that's who Herod was. And so Jesus is warning about religious authority as well as secular authority that can lead us astray. Now, the leaven is referring to the fact that there's something in the bread there shouldn't be. Now, we have a baker among us. Virgil knows about things that shouldn't be in bread. So I thought it'd be fun to ask Virgil, what's something that would contaminate bread?
Well, biggest thing that contaminates is the beetles.
The beetles!
I was gonna say.
The weevils, right? I remember when I was a little kid, my mom taught me about weevils. And they're in every flour.
You know why?
Go ahead.
The eggs are in it.
The eggs are
They
in it.
hatch.
They hatch.
First, they're little orange. Mamas. And then they go into the fold.
Isn't that nice? Yeah.
About a 3-week cycle. They can hatch out.
Wow.
In the right condition.
Okay. And I remember you telling me you had to pick them out to test how many there were in such a sample.
Because the government says you've got allowed parts per million of bugs.
Right.
You can have, you can have so many parts per
You're just gonna ruin
million.
everybody eating pork.
It's the end of that, huh?
Whenever I went to,
I don't eat bread.
Protein too.
whenever I went to the lab, that was one of my jobs. Counting parts for bugs.
Yep. I figured, you told me that story before, so I thought you'd be willing to share it again. Yeah, so
Somebody-
go ahead.
Somebody at Callio School a few years back didn't know how to prepare for the summer with flour, sugar, such as that. And when we went back, that was the first year I worked. And I went in the storeroom and here's all these bags of stuff sitting in there. Open up one, bugs. Put up another one, bugs. Everything in there was, and I figured it out. It was like $600 and some dollars worth of stuff that went in the garbage.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Just because I think it was somebody's lazy.
One of the Navy stories was that whenever they went on the ship, after 3 weeks' time, they started making raisin bread so they wouldn't see.
Oh, you're kidding. You know, too.
The guy who told it was.
Raisin
insane.
bread.
We don't
That's
know.
good.
Told them for the truth. I don't know.
Oh, I have to ask my, well, I can't ask
I'm making
my
a
brother
note to look up
tomorrow.
all my flour. I'm gonna use it.
oh,
Good thing you know what we're eating half the time.
yeah,
If you freeze your flour, it won't happen, right?
Huh?
If you freeze your flour, it won't happen.
Well, you freeze your flour. There is one way of getting rid of them, so they won't get in your flour. They, back several years ago, they invented a scintillator, and it cracked the eggs. But all the flour. So the flour you need to be, that's the reason all the wheat is gassed.
Well, those bugs hurt you?
Huh?
Did they hurt you if you eat them?
Probably not.
Probably not.
I think they're,
Virgil looks pretty
Because
good yet.
Everybody's gonna be hurt, that's all I gotta do.
yeah. No, I think they're innate. They're kind of like lice. Lice are a pest, but they don't actually carry disease. Yeah, which is, ironic. So getting back to leaven. Leaven is something that, literally speaking, could be in bread. You got to have leavening to rise bread. And all, Virgil knows more about that than I do.
That's more mold.
Mold, okay. Well, they would eat unleavened bread. And we all know why, because when the Israelites left Egypt, they didn't have time to do that. And so they just ate unleavened bread so they could get out quickly. Well, if you've ever ate unleavened bread, which we do every Sunday, of course, it's flat and crisp and dense. And I eat gluten-free bread, which is flat and dense and crisp.
Feel sorry for you.
Whenever you see something gluten-free, it's very rare that it's got a rise to it. It's very hard to pull off. Like gluten-free crust for pizza is very flat by
And the
nature.
gluten is a framework of the bread.
Right.
That's what they say.
Yeah. It's hard to do bread without gluten by nature. So Jesus, of course, again, not talking about literal bread. The disciples immediately think about literal bread, but that's because they're hungry, as Shirley pointed out. They only had one loaf in the boat with them, and there's 12 of them. I don't know about you, but one slice of bread ain't going to do me for lunch. So, again, I think we can dismiss the disciples there. And you got to give it to Mark, because Mark here is Peter's protege at the time, and he writes this fact down. Do you think Peter found that very flattering?
No.
No. Well, let me show you another part here. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but just flip your page over and go to verse 33, and I'll just read this. But turning around and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but man." Mark wrote that down as Peter's protege. So under the supervision of Peter basically allows him to tell the truth about a story. And the only disciple to ever have been called Satan by Jesus is Peter. So that shows you, especially later on in life when the Gospels were being written, that Peter was very humble. He was willing to be embarrassed on that level, because that's an embarrassing story. And so the honesty of Scripture just impresses me endlessly. I read a lot of other things, a lot of books, biographies, histories, and people are rare to be that honest. And here's Peter and Mark being that honest, the Lord being that honest. And also, to some degree, you got to be impressed once again with Jesus, of course, because the men he picks out aren't always the brightest bulbs in the socket. And yet he's willing to be associated with them. And I think, you know what? He's willing to be associated with me. So fair enough, right? Got to be honest about ourselves. So this leaven that the Pharisees and Herod had was not supposed to be there. So it wasn't just the fact that they existed or even what they themselves did, but it's what they taught. And the reason why that was so important is because if Herod the governor says you have to do something, well, what's the general consensus? You got to do it. If the Pharisees tell the Jews, you got to do this, you got to do that, what's the general consensus? Well, you got to do this, you got to do that. So to buck the secular and religious authority to do the right thing was dangerous. I mean, the Jews saw to many people's death. Herod had no problem killing anyone. Who is Herod famous for killing? 2 examples in particular. Can you name one?
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist, right? And what else? Who else?
All the little babies under 2 boys.
Is that the same Herod here?
No,
No, but well, fair enough.
but they all wore the same name. I don't know of a single good Herod, so you could group them together. They didn't care. They were not concerned.
So
And
is this
so-
the Herod that killed John the Baptist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so Herod here is a ruthless, brutal man, and he doesn't care who he has to kill to stay in power. And that's why he killed the little babies, right? Because the Magi came to him and said, we're looking for the king. And he's like, oh, tell me where this king is. And he was willing to kill innocent babies to keep staying in power. Which should tell you something about anybody who's in power today. Who knows how far they'll go? It is-
You hear some of the people in some other countries, they'll kill their relatives because
Oh,
they're
yeah.
afraid they're going to take the power away from them.
Mm-hmm. Lots of stories in history where kings would kill their own sons. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's a story in the Old Testament of a queen named Athaliah, who the next king of Israel, she was just a stewardess. She was just holding on to the throne, waiting for the next king to grow up. Well, King Josiah was just a baby. Well, she wanted to kill King Josiah to prevent him from taking the throne. Well, a girl named Abishag. Now that's a name, right? It's too bad there's not another Abishag out there. I can't imagine a parent naming their child that, but when you know what this girl did, you'll think, man, she's worthy to have somebody named after her. She took that little baby into the temple, which had not been in service for years, and hid that child successfully for 6 years.
Wow.
My.
Yeah, to prevent him from being killed. Then when he was 8 years old, she presented him as the king of Judah, proved his lineage, and removed Athaliah from the throne. That is one brave woman. Now here's the kicker to this story. Josiah was the last king of Judah left alive. Athaliah had killed all the others. So if Athaliah had succeeded, Jesus never would have came on this earth. He was the last king of Judah.
Wow.
So the Lord, through Abishag, we should say, saved us. Pretty amazing, isn't it? And nobody ever
Never heard
talks
that
about
story
Abishag.
before.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that sad, Abishag? Yeah. It's too bad she didn't have a slightly nicer name. At least it doesn't translate well in English. Maybe it means beautiful in some other
She
language.
must be a very good person.
Yes,
so
yes.
We'll go along with that.
Right. And so you compare to somebody like Abishag, who had no power, but rescued us all through the Lord's help, to Pharisees and Herod, who had all power, but nothing they said or did was worth following. And so Jesus is telling his disciples here, it's going to be dangerous to follow me. You're going to have to buck these self-made, man-made authorities to do what's right. Now, John the Baptist, he did just that, didn't he? What did he face Herod about? There's a bonus question for you. I'm really going to make you think. Do you remember what he got mad at Herod for? He married his brother's wife. Yep, took her as his own. Told his brother to. Pretty crazy, huh? And John the Baptist, because Herod claimed to be a Jew, called him out for it.